There are songs we sing without thinking. Songs that move through us the way breath does, automatic and old. Rockabye Baby is one of them. You've heard it in hospital rooms and bedrooms, hummed by grandmothers and whispered by exhausted parents at 3 a.m. It asks nothing of you. It requires no explanation. You sing it because it was sung to you and because it works. But if you stop for a moment and listen to the words, something shifts. The melody is gentle. The rhythm is soft and repetitive, designed to calm. But the story it tells is strange. A baby is placed in a cradle. The cradle is not on the floor or beside a bed. It is in a treetop, high above the ground, swaying in the wind. The branches rock the child, the leaves whisper, and then the bough breaks. The cradle falls. The baby falls with it. This is what we sing to children when we want them to sleep. We sing them a lullaby about a fall that cannot be stopped, a cradle that will not hold, a moment of peace that ends in collapse. And we do this without hesitation, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The most common version goes like this: Rock-a-bye baby, on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall. And down will come baby, cradle and all. Some versions end there. Others add a line, something hopeful, something about the baby being caught or comforted. But the original image remains. The child in the tree, the inevitable breaking, the fall. It feels like a warning dressed as comfort. No one knows exactly when the rhyme first appeared in print. The earliest confirmed version dates to the late 18th century, published in a collection of nursery songs in England. But the melody and structure suggest something older. The language is simple, almost too simple, the kind of simplicity that survives because it has been repeated so many times that all ornament has been worn away. And yet, for all its familiarity, no one can say with certainty where it came from. There are theories, of course. Some claim it originated in America, sung by English settlers who observed Native American mothers hanging cradles from tree branches to keep infants safe from animals and soothed by the wind. Others suggest it was a political satire, a veiled reference to the English monarchy or a royal heir whose position was unstable. Still others believe it was simply a folk rhyme, passed down orally for generations before anyone thought to write it down. But none of these explanations feel complete, because the image at the heart of the lullaby is too specific, too strange, to be easily dismissed as metaphor or satire. A baby in a tree, a cradle that rocks and then breaks, a fall that seems both predicted and unavoidable. These are not the elements of a gentle bedtime song. They are something else, and yet we sing it. We sing it to calm children, to ease them into sleep, to comfort them in the dark. We sing it as if the fall doesn't matter, as if the breaking bough is just part of the rhythm, just another line in a song that has always existed. We sing it because it was given to us, and we give it forward without question. But somewhere beneath the melody, beneath the repetition, there is a discomfort that refuses to go away. Why would a lullaby contain an image of death? Why would a song meant to soothe describe a fall? And why, after all this time, does it still feel so familiar, so right, even when the words themselves suggest something is deeply wrong? The answers are not in the song as we know it now. They are older than that. The rhyme we sing today is an echo, a fragment. What it once meant, what it once did for the people who first sang it, has been worn smooth by time. But the shape of it remains. The structure, the fall, the cradle in the tree. And if we listen closely, we can still hear it. The memory of something we were never supposed to forget. The image does not belong to one place. A child suspended in a tree, a cradle rocking in the wind, a fall that feels both accidental and fated. These elements do not appear only in Rockabye Baby. They appear across time, across borders, in stories and customs that seem to have no connection to one another except for the fact that they repeat the same unsettling pattern. The rhyme is not unique. It is an echo of something older. In the forests of northern Europe, there are folk songs that describe children placed in baskets hung from branches. The songs are meant to be soothing, sung by mothers and grandmothers, but the imagery is nearly identical. Elevation, wind, motion, and the ever-present possibility of falling. The language is different, the melodies are different, but the structure remains. In Scandinavia, some versions speak of infants left in trees to be watched over by forest spirits. In Germanic regions, there are tales of cradles placed high above the ground to keep children safe from wolves or other dangers that moved through the night. The reasons given vary, but the action is always the same. The child is lifted, the child is suspended, the child is vulnerable. And in early American colonial records, There are mentions of European settlers observing Native American mothers hanging woven cradles from tree branches. The cradles swayed gently in the breeze, and the motion was said to calm restless infants while keeping them elevated from the cold ground and away from insects or animals. Some historians believe this practice may have inspired the English nursery rhyme, carried back across the ocean and woven into the oral tradition. But the pattern is older than colonial contact. It appears in medieval European manuscripts, in references to cradles hung from rafters or placed in elevated positions during times of plague or famine. It appears in folk customs where newborns were symbolically lifted toward the sky as part of blessing rituals, as if proximity to the heavens might offer protection. And it appears in fragmentary myths where children are left in sacred groves or placed in tree hollows as offerings or acts of desperation. The details change, the context shifts, but the essential elements remain consistent. The child, the elevation, the fall. This is not a coincidence. Folklorists have long recognized that when the same motif appears across unrelated cultures, it often points to something deeper than simple borrowing or invention. It suggests a shared human experience, a common fear or belief so fundamental that it generates similar stories in different places and times. The cradle in the tree may reflect an ancient understanding of childhood as a liminal state, a period of extreme vulnerability where the line between life and death was thin and uncertain. In many pre-modern societies, infant mortality was not an abstract tragedy. It was an expected reality. Parents knew that most children would not survive to adulthood. They knew that illness, accident, or hunger could take a child at any moment. And so they developed rituals, songs, and stories that acknowledge this fragility without naming it directly. The cradle in the tree becomes, in this context, both a literal practice and a symbolic act. Elevation might have been practical, a way to protect sleeping infants from predators or pests, but it was also symbolic, placing the child closer to the realm of spirits or gods, as if height itself offered some measure of divine protection. The rocking motion mimicked the womb, the mother's arms, the rhythm of breathing, and the fall, when it came, was not an accident. It was an inevitability woven into the structure of life itself. The song does not deny the fall. It includes it. It prepares for it. This is what makes Rock-a-Bye Baby so unsettling. It does not pretend that children are safe. It does not lie about the fragility of the cradle or the weakness of the bough. It sings the truth in a soft voice, wrapping fear in melody so that it can be spoken aloud without breaking. And this pattern, this willingness to name danger while simultaneously soothing, appears again and again in the folklore of childhood. Lullabies across cultures often contain dark imagery: wolves, shadows, separation, loss. They do not exist to terrify. They exist to acknowledge, to ritualize, to give shape to fears that cannot be controlled. The cradle in the tree is not just a nursery rhyme. It is a pattern, a memory, a way of holding the weight of something too heavy to carry alone. By the time Rock-a-Bye Baby was written down in the 18th century, its original meaning had likely already been lost. The practical reasons for hanging cradles from trees had faded. The ritual significance had been forgotten, but the image survived because it still resonated. Because on some level, parents still understood what it meant to sing a child to sleep with a song about falling. What remains is not an isolated rhyme, but a fragment of a much larger tradition, a tradition that once gave voice to the fears every parent carried, the hopes they whispered into the dark, and the knowledge that some things cannot be protected, only witnessed. The cradle rocks, the wind blows, the bough breaks, and the song continues, passed from one generation to the next, carrying a meaning we no longer fully remember but still somehow recognize. In the old world, a tree was never just a tree. It was a threshold, a living boundary between the earth below and the sky above, between what was known and what was hidden. Its roots reached into darkness, its branches stretched toward the heavens, and in that space, suspended between two worlds, things could happen that were not possible on solid ground. To place a child in a tree was to place them at the edge of something. Some folklorists believe the imagery in Rock-a-Bye Baby may reflect an ancient understanding of trees as sacred spaces, liminal zones where the mortal and the divine overlapped. In many pre-Christian European cultures, certain trees were believed to house spirits or serve as dwelling places for gods. The oak, the ash, the yew, these were not just sources of wood or shelter, they were living monuments to forces larger than human life. A child placed in such a tree was not simply being protected from wolves or cold ground. They were being offered, in a sense, to something beyond the visible world. The act of elevation might have been a form of blessing, a way of asking unseen powers to watch over a fragile life. Or it might have been a test, a symbolic passage through danger that the child had to survive in order to belong fully to the world of the living. The fall, in this context, was not an accident. It was part of the ritual, because in many ancient belief systems, survival itself was understood as a kind of negotiation. Children were not born into safety. They were born into uncertainty, and their continued existence depended on forces that could not be controlled: weather, illness, hunger, the will of gods or spirits. Parents could not guarantee a child's survival, but they could ritualize it. They could create moments where the danger was named, where the possibility of loss was acknowledged, and where the act of continuing to live became a form of sacred perseverance. The cradle rocks, the wind blows, the bough breaks. This sequence may have once functioned as a symbolic rehearsal of mortality. The child is elevated, made vulnerable, exposed to forces beyond human control. And then they fall, or they do not. The outcome is not in the hands of the parent. It is in the hands of fate, of the gods, of whatever powers governed life and death in the ancient worldview. Some scholars suggest the imagery might also be connected to rites of passage, moments when a child transitioned from one stage of life to another. In many cultures, infants were not considered fully human until they survived a certain period, days, weeks, or months after birth. Before that threshold, they existed in a kind of liminal state, not quite part of the community, not yet named or claimed. The fall from the tree could represent the crossing of that threshold, the moment when the child either entered the world fully or did not. This would explain why the lullaby does not end with reassurance. It does not promise that the child will be caught or saved. It simply states what happens. The cradle falls, the baby falls, and what comes after is left unsaid. Because perhaps, in its original context, the song was not meant to comfort the child. It was meant to prepare the parent. In times when most children did not survive infancy, parents had to find ways to live with loss before it happened. They could not afford to attach fully, to hope completely, without also holding space for the possibility of death. The lullaby, in this sense, becomes a kind of emotional rehearsal, a way of singing the worst outcome into existence so that it loses some of its power. By naming the fall, by making it part of the nightly ritual, the song transforms an unthinkable horror into something that can be spoken, repeated, even sung softly in the dark. This does not make it less painful, but it makes it bearable. And there is another layer, darker and more difficult to confirm. Some historians have suggested that in certain regions and certain desperate times, the imagery of a child in a tree might have encoded memories of infant sacrifice or abandonment. When resources were scarce, when famine or plague threatened entire communities, impossible choices had to be made. Not all children could be saved, and in some cases, the choice was made to leave a child exposed to the elements, placed in a tree or a remote location where death would come quickly and without direct human action. This is not something ancient people would have written down. It is not something they would have celebrated, but they might have remembered it, and they might have encoded that memory in stories and songs, transforming an unbearable truth into a rhyme that could be passed down without ever being fully explained. We cannot know for certain. The distance is too great, the evidence too fragmentary, but the pattern remains. What we can say is this: the imagery of a baby in a tree, a cradle that falls, a child exposed to forces beyond control, these elements carried weight. They meant something. They did something for the people who sang them. They acknowledged fragility without denying hope. They named danger without surrendering to despair. They created a space where the unspeakable could be spoken, where the fear every parent carried could be shared, ritualized, and survived. The cradle rocks because the wind blows. The bough breaks because wood is not eternal. The child falls because gravity does not make exceptions. And the song continues, holding all of this within its gentle melody, carrying forward a truth too old and too painful to be forgotten, but too unbearable to be said plainly. We do not remember why we sing it. We do not remember where it came from, or what it once meant, or why a lullaby about falling should feel like the right thing to hum in the dark when a child will not sleep. But we sing it anyway. We have always sung it. And in that act of repetition, something older than memory is preserved. Rockabye Baby is not the only story like this. Across cultures, across centuries, there are songs and tales that survive long after their original meanings have been forgotten. They persist not because anyone decided they should, but because they carry something essential, something that resonates even when it can no longer be explained. The words change, the context disappears, but the shape of the story remains. Passed down like a stone worn smooth by water, its edges softened but its weight still intact. This is how cultural memory works. Not through deliberate preservation, but through repetition. Not through understanding, but through need. The people who first sang about a baby in a tree likely knew exactly what they were doing. They knew why the image mattered, what it symbolized, what fear or hope or ritual it encoded. But as generations passed, that knowledge faded. The practical reasons disappeared. The belief systems shifted. The rituals were abandoned or transformed, and yet the song remained, carried forward not because people understood it, but because it still felt true. Because on some deep, unspoken level, parents recognized something in the melody, something about fragility, something about the precariousness of life, something about the act of singing to a child in the dark, knowing that no amount of love or care could guarantee their safety. The cradle rocks because the wind blows. The bough breaks because all things break eventually. And the song acknowledges this without flinching, without pretending otherwise. This is what allows it to survive. Most lullabies lie. They promise warmth and safety. They speak of guardian angels and peaceful sleep. They create a world where children are protected, where danger does not exist, where morning always comes. And those songs are necessary too. They serve a purpose. But they do not last the way Rockabye Baby has lasted, precisely because they deny what every parent knows but rarely speaks aloud. That children are vulnerable, that the world is not always kind, and that sometimes the best we can do is hold them close and hope. Rockabye Baby does not offer false comfort. It offers something harder and perhaps more valuable, an acknowledgement that fear and love exist together, that singing to a child does not erase danger but creates a space where danger can be named and still survived. And so it endures, not because it is cheerful or comforting, but because it is honest in a way that resonates across time. There is another reason the song may have survived. It contains just enough mystery to invite retelling. The image of a baby in a tree is strange enough to provoke questions, but simple enough to be remembered. It does not explain itself. It does not offer easy answers. And this openness, this refusal to be fully understood, is what keeps people returning to it, generation after generation, each one wondering what it means, each one adding their own interpretation or leaving it as they found it. Stories that explain too much die quickly. They become fixed, rigid, unable to adapt to new contexts or new fears. But stories that hold space for ambiguity, that allow multiple meanings to coexist, those stories bend without breaking. They survive not despite their mystery, but because of it. Rockabye Baby has been called many things over the years: a memory of Native American cradle practices, a political satire, a folk song about infant mortality, a remnant of pagan tree worship, a simple nonsense rhyme with no deeper meaning at all. And perhaps, in different times and places, it has been all of these things. Perhaps it has always been a vessel, empty enough to hold whatever meaning the singer brings to it. But beneath all the theories and interpretations, there is something that does not change: the structure, the pattern, the fall. And this is what we inherit, whether we understand it or not. Every time we sing Rockabye Baby, we are participating in something older than we know. We are repeating words that were sung before we were born, that will be sung after we are gone. We are carrying forward a fragment of belief, or fear, or hope that once mattered enough to someone that they wove it into a melody and taught it to their children, and their children taught it to theirs, and so on, until the song reached us, stripped of context but still carrying weight. This is the strange power of cultural memory. It does not require belief. It does not require understanding. It only requires repetition, and so we sing. We sing to children who do not know what the words mean. We sing in hospital rooms and nurseries, in moments of exhaustion and tenderness, in the middle of the night when nothing else will calm a restless infant. We sing because it works, because the rhythm soothes, because the melody is familiar, because it was sung to us, and we are passing it forward. But perhaps, somewhere beneath the conscious act of singing, we are also remembering, not with our minds, but with something older, some part of us that recognizes the pattern, that knows what it means to hold something fragile and sing to it in the dark, knowing that the cradle will not hold forever, that the bough will break, that the fall will come, and still, we sing. Because this is what the song has always done. It has made space for the unbearable. It has allowed us to name what we fear without being consumed by it. It has carried forward a truth too old to be forgotten and too painful to be spoken plainly. The cradle rocks, the wind blows, the bough breaks, and the song continues. A memory we no longer understand but still somehow remember.